Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing another card example in my Simple Sets series, and this one features some products from Kristina, Werner, and Concord and Ninth. And I'm taking my color inspiration from Kate Spade. So here's a look at the products I will be using today. First off is the 6x9 Botanic Shade Stencil. I love these stencils for creating kind of a 2-for-1 card design because you can do a full sheet of 5.5 by 8.5 cardstock, stencil the design, and then trim it in half. Now, I didn't actually end up using this today, but this is the Woodlines background stamp. Kristina has been doing such a great job with the background stamps. I'm absolutely in love with them. And then finally, I'll be using the Sending Trio stamps and coordinating dies to create my sentiment. I'm going to start out by ink blending my background, and I am going to use some true greens. Now, if you've ever been in like the Kate Spade outlet store, they're like bags are that true green, they have black, but I'm gonna bring in a little bit of Nectar cardstock here to offset this. So I'm positioning stencil number 1 over this sheet of Nectar cardstock that measures 5.5 by 8.5 inches. And you can see that the stencil is slightly larger than the cardstock. I'm gonna mark off where I'm placing stencil number 1 on my grip mat. This grip mat is from Altenew. And I'm using some mint tape from scrapbook.com. This is just giving me a guide so that when I position stencils 2 and 3, I can get them in relatively the same area. I'm creating a corner with this tape at the upper right-hand corner. This one's a larger corner, and then I'm gonna create a smaller corner in the lower left-hand corner. Now, there are tools that kind of help you position these things, and you could use like a MISTI stamping tool or something like that and place this in the corner and use a little bit larger sheet of cardstock to achieve this same result. But I just wanted to show you a different way of doing this today. Now for my inks, I'm using Parsley and Evergreen. So I'm going in on stencil number 1. I have a large 1-inch blending brush from Pink Fresh Studio, and I'm applying a heavy hand of Parsley. Now, I think my ink pad is probably a little on the dry side. I'm not sure if I've ever re-inked this one. So it's taking a little more elbow grease than it probably would if this was properly inked. You can see I'm going in, as I said, with a heavy hand. I was probably just checking my text messages right there, which is where my hand disappeared to. But I'm getting a nice coverage of ink over this stencil and kind of covering up that nectar colored cardstock underneath. Because I'm using an ink that's a darker shade than the cardstock, I'm able to go over that color and not have that parsley ink affected too much. Now, once I've blended over the entire stencil, I'm going to wipe it down and remove stencil number 1, and then I am going to position stencil number 2, and I'm just using those tape guidelines that I created to position this. Now, for stencil number 2, I'm using Parsley ink again because I wanted these true greens, which is very Kate Spade, but I'm going in with a lighter hand this time. And you're gonna see that when I remove this, I'm gonna lose a little definition between stencils 1 and 2, but we'll go back in a few minutes and we'll fix that. For now, I'm just gonna continue ink blending this stencil and get a lighter layer, but still try to do quite a bit of solid inking over this second stencil. So once I had that to my liking, I wiped down stencil number 2 and removed it. And then I realized this leaf up in that kind of mid-right area was really losing definition. And so I went over that edge again. I'm gonna have to fix that here in just a few minutes, but for now, we're gonna keep ink blending. So I'm positioning stencil number 3, and this time I'm using Evergreen ink. It's still a very true green ink. It doesn't lean too blue or too yellow. And so I think it pairs very nicely with the parsley and my kind of Kate Spade inspired color theme here. So I'm going to ink over this entire thing. You're going to notice that I have quite a bit of ink down on all of these stencils, and I'm not gonna lie, it caused me a little bit of a problem here in just a bit, but I'll show you how I fix that. So once I inked over stencil number 3, I am going to remove it. I probably should have wiped it down first, but I did not. And look at this beautiful kind of tropical pattern that I have in those gorgeous greens. Now I took this over to my trimmer and I trimmed this in half at 4 1/4 inches. So now I have 2 card size panels. I'm going to trim down one of these panels to about 5 by 3 3/4 inches to create a kind of offset panel here. And this is where I realized that with all of that ink on the surface of the cardstock that hadn't yet dried and absorbed, I actually was getting inky green fingerprints onto my card front as well as on my trimmer. So I had to clean up my trimmer, and I also had to just deal with these marks here in just a bit. So you can kind of see the green fingerprints that I got on the panel here. I'm going to let those dry, and before I do anything with them, I'm going to make sure they're good and dry. And so in the meantime, I'm going to take this sentiment from the Sending Trio stamp set, and I'm going to ink it up in some Altenew Obsidian Black Pigment ink and stamp it onto some white cardstock. Now, since I'm doing a 2-for-1 simple set today, once I have that first sentiment stamped, and I have no idea what I'm doing here, I'm probably having to juggle my phone and my work at the same time, and I'm probably looking over at my phone to see what's going on. But I'm going to rotate this, and I'm going to re-ink and stamp that sending sentiment again. So I'm keeping things very similar on both cards. We're going to change the layouts just a tiny bit, but I am keeping that crisp black and white sending, which I think is so beautiful. Now, when you're stamping a sentiment like this, you want to make sure that you're not putting too much pressure, because you can definitely blow out the fine lines of this sentiment stamp, and we don't want to do that. So just a little bit of pressure and that beautiful black ink, and we're good to go. Now, I grab my heat tool and I heat set that pigment ink because it is a pigment ink. I also heat set my card fronts because I noticed that there was a ton of ink and it was taking a little bit to dry. Then I took a very fine grit nail buffing block, and I'm going over the areas where I got fingerprints. Now, you can definitely do this with like a paper sanding block as well, but this is what I have in my house, and it seems to work pretty well. It picked up a little bit of that green ink, kind of rubbed it away from the surface, and I was able to salvage that card front. Now, once I had that done, I took the coordinating die from the Sending Trio stamp and die set, and I am going to die cut these sending sentiments. You'll notice that I'm covering my stamped images with a piece of scrap computer paper because I wanted to make sure that none of this black pigment ink transferred to my cutting plates. Now, honestly, at this point, I think I walked away because I wasn't sure about these backgrounds, and I came back from lunch and I decided to try something out. I'm taking one of my card panels and I'm lining up stencil number 2 with the existing pattern. And then I'm going to take some Altenew Enchanted Gold pigment ink and a micro blending brush and rub a little bit of ink around the edge of these leaves because I really felt like they were getting lost with the green on green. I picked up my stencil to kind of peek to see if I liked it, and I did. I thought maybe I could be ruining this, but maybe not. And when I had a little peek, I was pleasantly surprised at the results. So I finished this panel off and I repeated this on the second panel as well. You can see that gold little halo around those leaves, which helps set them off from the other parsley leaves in the pattern. Now, I grabbed a couple of the sub-sentiments from the Sending Trio stamp set, and I mounted them on my MISTI stamping tool, and I'm inking them up in the Evergreen ink and stamping them onto some white cardstock. I'm then going to grab the coordinating die for these sentiments. There's a couple sentiment strips in the set, and I am going to die cut these. Now, I'm getting my head right over because I'm positioning this die more to the left, and I'm going to do that on both of these sentiments as I cut them out. Then I am actually going to re-die cut these sentiments by placing the die along the edge of that previously cut strip. I'm going to line up the right edge of that cutting die with the end of my sentiment to kind of trim this down. Now, I could have done this with a trimmer, but it doesn't give you that die kind of pressed look. And so I decided to just double cut these sentiments instead, and you can see I have a beautiful result there. Now, I also die cut a second layer of that sending sentiment from some plain white cardstock just to give these a little bit of heft and dimension on my card front. And I'm gluing that plain white layer to the back of my stamped layer. And I'm taking the little sub-sentiment and just attaching it to the lower portion of those descenders on that sending word. Just kind of positioning them. One is centered, one kind of comes off to the left a little bit more because they are different lengths. Once I have my sentiments assembled, it's time to assemble the cards. So I trimmed a really fine black cardstock mat for each of these card fronts, and I'm using some tape runner adhesive to adhere the card fronts to these black mats. And this to me says Kate Spade, that black and green, bringing in that black for these cards really just kept that modern vibe. I love the way that these turned out. Now for each of these cards, I'm going to attach the sentiment using some foam adhesive. For this Sending Prayers, I'm attaching it in the kind of center upper portion of this card. And for the other card, I did kind of a lower left third positioning. Now these card fronts were attached onto a white card base using some foam adhesive, and I finished them off using some metallic gold pearl drops from Concord and Ninth. So here's a look at my 2-for-1 cards, a very simple set to create in one session. These did not take long at all, and I absolutely love that hint of gold that's helping set off that pattern from the same color pattern in the background. It really kind of gives it a glow and just gives it a little extra shine and kind of elevates that blending just a little bit. And if I'm being honest, it was a happy accident. I'm not gonna lie. Now, as always, you can check out the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube. I'll have everything linked below, or you can head on over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I'll have that linked below as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed these projects, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I post a card making, paper crafting video tutorial or for my Carissa Crafts live stream broadcasts. Leave me a comment below and let me know which of these 2 cards is your favorite. Would you have done the gold ink blending on these as well? I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for joining me. I'm so glad you're here. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. To subscribe to my channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.